It was meant to be just another afternoon at Rossetti's bakery. The cheerful chaos of children's laughter mingled with the rhythmic hum of ovens, and the sweet, heavy scent of baking sugar danced in the air. Then the door creaked open almost apologetically. A woman stood framed in the doorway, her clothing worn and faded, her eyes holding the deep weariness etched by years of relentless struggle. Clutched in her hand was a little girl, her shoes scuffed and splitting at the seams, a faded ribbon barely holding back a cascade of tangled hair. They paused just inside, their gaze drawn to the vibrant display case, a tempting array of meticulously decorated cakes. Frosting swirled in fantastical designs, strawberries glistened like rubies under the bright lights, and candles stood poised, anticipating joyous celebrations. The little girl, her voice barely a whisper, tugged on her mother's hand. "Mom, can I pick one?" Her mother swallowed hard, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach the corners of her weary eyes. She leaned closer to the young cashier behind the counter, her voice a fragile murmur only 3 people in the bakery could hear. "Do you, by any chance, have a cake that's perhaps a day old? Something small? It's my daughter's birthday today." The cashier, a girl barely out of high school, frowned, her bubblegum pink lips pursing in distaste. A few customers, engrossed in their pastries and gossip, stifled snickers behind their hands. But someone else heard the quiet exchange, too. In the dimly lit corner booth, Salvatore Costa, a man whose name alone could send shivers down the spines of grown men, sat nursing a tiny cup of espresso. His hands, etched with intricate tattoos that spoke of a life lived on the edge, tightened around the delicate porcelain. He saw the fleeting disappointment flicker across the little girl's face, saw the mother's desperate attempt to mask her daughter's sadness. Every word, spoken so softly, resonated with him like the sharp crack of gunfire. The cashier, impatience lacing her tone, sighed. "No, ma'am. We don't give away day-old goods to customers." The little girl's head drooped, her gaze fixed on her worn shoes. The mother blinked rapidly, fighting back tears that threatened to spill over. Then Salvatore Costa rose. The scraping of his chair against the tiled floor cut through the bakery's hum, silencing every conversation. The entire room seemed to hold its breath as he moved, a predator stalking its prey. He approached the mother and daughter, his towering shadow engulfing the brightly lit display case. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble that commanded attention. The mother turned, her eyes widening in fear. She recognized him instantly. Everyone in the city knew the face of Salvatore Costa, the man whispered about in hushed tones. But in his eyes, she saw something unexpected, something that wasn't anger. He knelt, bringing himself to the little girl's level, studying her tattered shoes, her trembling smile. "Tell me, sweetheart," he asked gently, "what kind of cake do you want for your birthday?" What happened next would irrevocably alter the course of all 3 of their lives. Stay tuned, because the Mafia boss's next act defied every expectation. But before we delve deeper, don't forget to give this a like, hit subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Now let's continue. The little girl's name was Sophia. 7 years old today, though hunger had robbed her of the plumpness usually associated with childhood. Hunger had a way of dimming bright eyes and silencing laughter. Her mother, Elena, had been navigating the treacherous currents of homelessness for the past 8 months. Ever since the factory where she worked had shuttered its doors, leaving her jobless and adrift. They relied on the meager offerings of the local shelter and the occasional act of kindness from strangers, which, sadly, were few and far between. Sophia, her eyes wide with wonder, pointed to a vanilla cake adorned with delicate pink roses and a scattering of rainbow sprinkles. "That one?" she whispered, then quickly added, her voice laced with a hint of resignation. "But a small piece is okay, Mom." Salvatore Costa had forged his empire on fear. Men twice his size quaked at the mere mention of his name. He held sway over half the city's illicit operations, commanding unwavering loyalty through fear and intimidation, settling disputes with methods that ensured his enemies vanished without a trace. But as he gazed at this 7-year-old girl, her simple request for a sliver of birthday cake. Something within him cracked open, a long dormant ember flickering back to life. Amy, the cashier, fidgeted nervously, her eyes darting between Salvatore and the door. The rumors surrounding him were legendary. Everyone in the neighborhood recognized his face from newspaper clippings and cautionary tales. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the counter. "Sir, I'm so sorry, but my manager doesn't allow us to give away food. It's store policy." Salvatore's dark, penetrating gaze shifted from Sophia to Amy, then to Elena, who was gently tugging on her daughter's hand, desperate to escape before the situation escalated. The other customers had fallen into an eerie silence, their conversations abruptly cut short. Even the espresso machine seemed to hold its breath, anticipating the storm that might erupt. "How much for the whole cake?" Salvatore asked, his voice carrying the undeniable weight of authority, the kind that demanded obedience. Amy fumbled with the price tag, her fingers clumsy. $42, sir." Elena stepped forward, panic rising in her voice. "Please, we don't need anything so expensive. We were just hoping for something. Perhaps old, something you might throw away anyway. We don't want any trouble." Salvatore reached inside his tailored jacket. The movement sent a ripple of tension through the bakery, every eye fixed on his hand. But instead of a weapon, he withdrew a thick, leather wallet worn soft with age. He peeled off 3 crisp $100 bills and placed them on the counter. "I want that cake, the whole thing, and I want you to put 7 candles on it. Can you do that?" Amy nodded frantically, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "Yes, sir. Absolutely." But Salvatore wasn't finished. He turned his attention to Elena, and when he spoke, his voice was softer, more compassionate than anyone in that room had ever heard from him. "When was the last time you two had a real meal?" Elena's chin trembled, her lower lip quivering. "Yesterday morning. The shelter served breakfast." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the hardened criminals who worked for Salvatore would have been stunned by what happened next. This man, known for ordering hits, breaking bones, and destroying lives, this man who ruled through intimidation and violence, was looking at a homeless mother and her hungry daughter with something none of his enemies had ever witnessed in his eyes. Compassion. "Amy," he said, his gaze still fixed on Elena and Sophia. "I want you to box up 2 of your best sandwiches, some of those pastries in the window, and whatever hot soup you have today. Put it all in a bag." "Sir, that'll be." Amy began to calculate, her mind reeling. "Just do it." He placed another $100 bill on the counter. "Keep the change." Sophia looked up at her mother, her brow furrowed in confusion. She had learned early in life that good things rarely happened to people like them. Strangers weren't kind. Adults didn't care about little girls with dirty clothes and worn-out shoes. But this man, this formidable figure she had seen on television news reports, was asking about her birthday cake as if it truly mattered. Elena was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, tears she desperately tried to conceal by looking down. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Salvatore remained silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. In that silence, memories flooded back, memories he had buried so deep he thought they were lost forever. Memories of his own 7th birthday, when his family had nothing. His mother, her face etched with both pride and desperation, trying to conjure something special out of thin air. He remembered the sting of rejection, the way neighbors had turned them away, the cold indifference of store owners, the way the world had decided that people like them didn't deserve kindness. "Because," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion, "everyone deserves to feel important on their birthday, especially little girls who ask for small pieces when they deserve the whole cake." Amy worked quickly, assembling the food while the cake was being prepared in the back. The other customers remained transfixed, witnessing a scene they would never forget. The most feared man in the city kneeling once more to speak with Sophia. "You know what, sweetheart?" he said, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "I don't think 7 candles are enough for someone as special as you. How about we make it 8? 1 for good luck, Sophia smiled for the first time that day. A genuine, radiant smile that lit up her face and made her look like the child she was meant to be. But what Salvatore did next would shock everyone even more than his unexpected generosity. Because this story was about to take a turn. A dramatic twist that no one in that bakery could have possibly foreseen. The cake arrived 15 minutes later. A vision of vanilla perfection decorated with 8 flickering candles and Sophia's name, meticulously written in delicate purple frosting. As Amy carefully carried it to the counter, Salvatore retrieved his phone and made a call. A call that would transform this simple act of kindness into something far more significant. "Marco," he said into the phone, his voice regaining that familiar edge of command. "I need you to bring the car around to Rossetti's bakery and call Maria. Tell her to prepare the guest room upstairs. We're going to have visitors." Elena's face drained of color. She clutched Sophia's hand tighter, her knuckles white. "What's happening? We just wanted some cake. We don't need anything else." The other customers began whispering frantically among themselves, their fear palpable. They knew Salvatore Costa's reputation. When he made phone calls, people disappeared. When he offered help, it usually came with strings attached, strings that could strangle you later. But Sophia was utterly mesmerized by the cake. 8 candles flickering like tiny stars. Her name spelled out in letters she could barely decipher but recognized as her own. For a fleeting moment, she forgot about the gnawing hunger, forgot about the cold, hard floors of the shelters, forgot about her mother's silent tears late at night. "Can I blow them out now, Mom?" she asked, her voice brimming with wonder. Salvatore looked at Elena, his gaze filled with understanding. This woman had learned to survive by avoiding men like him, by keeping her head down, by never accepting help that might come with a price she couldn't afford to pay. "You think I'm going to hurt you?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible, so only she could hear. "I understand why you might think that, but let me tell you something, Elena. I know your name because I've been watching you and your daughter for 3 weeks. Elena's blood turned to ice. She instinctively pulled Sophia closer, bracing herself to run, ready to abandon the cake, the food, everything, if it meant safeguarding her daughter. "Wait," Salvatore said, raising a hand to halt her. "You sleep in the alley behind the church on Maple Street. You take Sophia to the park every morning, before the other kids arrive, so she can play on the swings. You spend your afternoons at the library because it's warm and safe, and Sophia can lose herself in books you can't afford to buy her." Elena was trembling uncontrollably now, her eyes wide with terror. "Why have you been watching us?" "Because you remind me of someone I lost a long time ago." His voice cracked slightly, a sound so unexpected that Amy stopped counting the money and stared, transfixed. "My sister. She was a single mother, too. Struggled to feed her little girl, worked 3 jobs, never asked anyone for help. Too proud, too scared." The bakery had fallen into complete silence, broken only by the soft flickering of the candles on Sophia's cake. "What happened to her?" Elena whispered, her voice barely a breath. Salvatore's jaw tightened, his expression hardening. "She died in a car accident driving home from her 3rd job at 2 in the morning. She was so exhausted she fell asleep at the wheel. Her daughter, my niece, went into foster care. I never saw her again." Sophia looked up at the towering man with the suddenly vulnerable eyes and asked innocently, "Do you miss them?" The question struck Salvatore with the force of a physical blow. For 30 years, he had painstakingly constructed walls around that pain, burying it beneath layers of anger, power, and violence. But this 7-year-old girl, with her unwavering gaze and her simple birthday cake, had effortlessly breached every defense he had erected. "Every day," he said softly, his voice filled with a raw, aching honesty. "Every single day." Amy had finished packing the food, but she didn't dare interrupt the intensely personal moment unfolding before her. The other customers remained frozen, bearing witness to something they would never forget. The moment when the city's most feared man revealed the shattered heart he had been carrying for 3 decades. "I can't bring them back," Salvatore continued, looking directly at Elena, his voice resonating with sincerity. "But I can make sure you and Sophia don't end up like them. I can make sure you never have to choose between sleeping and working, between feeding your daughter and keeping her safe. Elena shook her head, her expression a mixture of disbelief and bewilderment. I don't understand. What do you want from us? Nothing, Salvatore said, his voice unwavering. I want to give you something. A job, an apartment, a chance for Sophia to go to school and have friends and blow out birthday candles every year until she's too old to make wishes. The door chimed as a sleek black sedan pulled up outside. Through the window, Elena could see two imposing men in expensive suits waiting by the car, their faces impassive. Those are my associates, Salvatore explained. They're going to drive us to a building I own downtown. It has apartments and one of them is empty. It has 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and windows that face the sunrise. Sophia would have her own room with a bed and a closet, and space for all the books she could ever want. Sophia tugged on her mother's sleeve, her eyes wide with excitement. Mom, does that mean I could have my own bed? Like the kids on TV? Elena was crying again, but these tears were different. They carried hope and fear and a profound sense of disbelief, all tangled together. Why would you do this? You don't even know us. Because, Salvatore said, carefully picking up the cake with surprising gentleness. Sometimes the universe gives you a second chance to do the right thing, and I've been waiting 30 years for mine. But what happened next would reveal that Salvatore's offer came with complications that no one could have anticipated. Because helping Elena and Sophia meant bringing them into his dangerous world. And his world was teeming with enemies who wouldn't hesitate to exploit a vulnerable woman and her daughter as pawns in their twisted game. As they prepared to leave the bakery, none of them noticed the man in the corner booth who had been pretending to read a newspaper. He meticulously folded it, extracted his phone, and placed a call of his own. Boss, he said quietly, his voice devoid of emotion. Salvatore Costa just picked up some strays. A woman and a kid. Looks like he's getting soft. Thought you should know. The voice on the other end was cold, calculating, devoid of warmth. Follow them. Find out where he's taking them. If Costa cares about them, they're valuable to us. Elena, holding Sophia's hand as they walked toward the sleek black sedan, had no inkling that accepting Salvatore's kindness had just painted a target on both their backs. The sedan's engine purred like a contented cat as they navigated the city streets. But inside the car, tension crackled like an electric current. Sophia sat nestled between Elena and Salvatore, clutching her birthday cake box with both hands, as if it might vanish if she loosened her grip. Elena stared out the window, watching familiar neighborhoods blur past, each block transporting them further from the only world she knew and deeper into a realm that filled her with dread. Salvatore made another phone call, his voice laced with a sharp, businesslike tone that brooked no argument. Tony, I need you to check the building. Full sweep. Then I want 2 men posted outside, and 2 more in the lobby. Discreet but visible. He paused, listening to the response on the other end of the line. Because I said so, that's all the reason you need. Elena's stomach plummeted. What's happening? Why do you need security? It's just a precaution, Salvatore said, his eyes scanning the street behind them through the rearview mirror. In my line of work, you learn to be careful about everything. Sophia looked up at him, her eyes filled with innocent curiosity. What kind of work do you do? The question hung in the air like the acrid scent of gunpowder. Elena held her breath, realizing she was on the cusp of discovering exactly what kind of man had just become their savior. Salvatore scrutinized the little girl's face, those guileless eyes that hadn't yet learned to fear the world the way her mother had. I help people solve their problems, he said carefully, choosing his words with deliberate precision. Sometimes those problems are complicated, like fixing broken things. Something like that, sweetheart. Elena wasn't fooled by the carefully constructed explanation. She had lived on the streets long enough to recognize danger in all its myriad forms. She knew Salvatore Costa's reputation, had heard the chilling stories whispered in shelters and soup kitchens. People who crossed him disappeared. Businesses that refused to cooperate mysteriously burned to the ground. Police officers who investigated too closely found themselves abruptly transferred to different cities. But she also knew the crushing weight of desperation. She knew what it meant to watch your daughter grow thinner each day, to witness hope fading from her eyes like candles slowly burning out. And despite every instinct screaming at her to flee, despite every rational thought warning her that this was a catastrophic mistake, she couldn't bring herself to reject the first genuine act of kindness they had received in months. The building they arrived at was nothing like Elena had envisioned. Instead of a forbidding, ominous fortress, it was a meticulously renovated brick apartment complex, overflowing with flower boxes brimming with vibrant blossoms in the windows and children's bicycles securely chained to the front railings. Families strolled in and out of the main entrance, carrying groceries and pushing strollers, living seemingly ordinary lives. "This is it," Salvatore announced as the car came to a halt. "Third floor, apartment 12. It's been empty for 6 months, but I had it cleaned and furnished last week." Elena's confusion deepened. "Last week? But you said you'd been watching us for 3 weeks. Salvatore emerged from the car and opened Sophia's door, assisting her with the same unexpected gentleness he had displayed in the bakery. "I've been thinking about this for longer than 3 weeks, he admitted, his gaze softening. "You two just gave me the courage to finally do something about it." As they walked towards the building entrance, Elena noticed the 2 men in dark suits stationed near the corner. They nodded respectfully to Salvatore but maintained their distance, an unspoken aura of vigilance surrounding them. Security, she realized, a constant, ever-present reminder of the perilous world they were now entering. The lobby was clean and brightly lit, the air filled with the subtle scent of fresh flowers. Mailboxes lined one wall, and a small seating area provided a space for residents to gather. An elderly woman, tending to a collection of potted plants near the window, smiled warmly at Sophia and complimented her on the birthday cake box she was clutching. It felt surreal, this veneer of normalcy coexisting alongside the palpable undercurrent of danger that clung to Salvatore like a second skin. They rode the elevator in silence, Sophia pressing her face against the small window to watch the floors glide past. Elena's mind raced, grappling with a whirlwind of questions and anxieties. What would happen when the other tenants discovered the identity of their new neighbor? What if Salvatore's enemies tracked them down? What if this unexpected generosity came with a price she couldn't possibly afford to pay? Apartment 12 was more beautiful than anything Elena could have ever imagined. Sunlight streamed through expansive windows, illuminating gleaming hardwood floors and walls painted in soft, inviting colors. The furniture was simple but comfortable, chosen with a thoughtful attention to detail. Sophia's bedroom was furnished with bookshelves and a small desk, a space where she could do her homework when she started school. "The refrigerator is stocked," Salvatore explained, opening the kitchen cabinets to reveal an array of plates, glasses, and all the basic necessities of a functional home. "The utilities are paid for the next year. There's a good elementary school 6 blocks away, and Maria downstairs can help with babysitting if you need to work." Sophia darted from room to room, her youthful exuberance bubbling to the surface as she investigated each new marvel. A real bathroom, complete with a bathtub for soaking away the day's grime. A kitchen with a window that offered a view of a small, enclosed courtyard. A bedroom with a bed adorned with pristine sheets and pillows that smelled faintly of lavender instead of harsh disinfectant. Elena stood transfixed in the middle of the living room, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what was transpiring. I don't know how to accept this," she stammered, her voice choked with emotion. "We don't have anything to give you in return." "You're giving me something just by being here?" Salvatore said softly, his gaze intense. "You're giving me a chance to remember who I used to be before I became the man everyone fears." But even as he spoke those heartfelt words, his phone vibrated insistently with a text message, instantly hardening his expression. The message was short, brutal, and terrifyingly direct. "Nice new friends you have, Salvatore. Pretty little girl. Would hate for anything to happen to her." Salvatore's blood ran cold. Vincent Torino, his most ruthless and formidable rival, had already identified Elena and Sophia. The operative who had shadowed them from the bakery had moved with a speed and efficiency that even Salvatore hadn't anticipated. He swiftly typed a response to Tony, his head of security. Asterisk code red. They found them. Triple the protection. Elena immediately sensed the shift in his demeanor. What's wrong? Salvatore glanced at Sophia, who was currently lost in the sanctuary of her new bedroom, meticulously arranging a collection of stuffed animals on her bed and humming a tuneless melody to herself. The unadulterated joy in her voice was pure and innocent, untouched by any knowledge of the malevolent forces that were already closing in. There are some people who won't be happy about my decision to help you, he admitted, his voice grave. People who view kindness as a weakness and seek to exploit it. The weight of comprehension settled on Elena's shoulders like a leaden blanket. By accepting Salvatore's help, by bringing Sophia into this apartment, she had unwittingly made her daughter a target. The very thing she had been desperately trying to shield Sophia from by living on the streets, maintaining a low profile, and keeping their heads down, had now found them. We can leave, she said instantly, her voice laced with panic. We can go back to the shelter. We can disappear again. No. Salvatore's voice reverberated with an unwavering resolve. Running won't solve anything now. They know who you are. They know Sophia's face. The only way to keep you safe is to keep you close. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes, tears of regret, of fear, of utter helplessness. What have we done? She whispered, her voice cracking. What have I done to her? Sophia appeared in the doorway, still clutching one of the stuffed animals she had unearthed from her bed. Mom, why are you crying? She asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Don't you like our new house? Elena knelt and embraced her daughter in a fierce, protective hug, inhaling the familiar scent of her hair and desperately trying to etch the feeling of holding her safe and close into her memory. Because deep down, she knew that their lives had just become infinitely more complicated, infinitely more perilous. Salvatore watched them, his own heart twisting with a pang of remorse that was almost unbearable. He had simply wanted to rescue them, to provide them with the stable and secure life that his sister and niece had been so tragically denied. Instead, he had inadvertently painted targets on their backs, dragging them into a brutal conflict they couldn't possibly comprehend. But there was no turning back now. Vincent Torino had made his opening move, and Salvatore had no choice but to respond, swiftly and decisively. The only question that remained was whether he could successfully shield Elena and Sophia from harm while simultaneously waging a war that had been simmering for years. As the lengthening shadows of evening began to creep across the apartment floor, none of them suspected that just 3 blocks away, Vincent Torino was already meticulously crafting his next move. And his plan extended far beyond simple threatening messages. It involved systematically dismantling everything Salvatore held dear and using it to utterly obliterate him. Vincent Torino was not a man known for his patience. While Salvatore remained in the apartment with Elena and Sophia, Vincent was sequestered in the dimly lit back room of his upscale Italian restaurant, studying a series of surveillance photos spread across a polished mahogany table, arranging them like playing cards in a high-stakes, life-or-death game. His fingers drummed a restless rhythm against the wood as he scrutinized each image with cold, calculating eyes. Elena leading Sophia to the park, her hand clasped firmly in her mother's. Sophia engrossed in a book at the local library, a haven of warmth and quiet. Salvatore kneeling beside the little girl in the bakery, his formidable presence softened by a genuine tenderness. 30 years, Vincent muttered to his loyal lieutenant, Marco Benedetti, his voice low and menacing. 30 years I've been searching for Salvatore's weakness, and it casually strolls into a bakery, begging for expired cake. Marco shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting nervously around the room. He had worked for Vincent long enough to recognize that ominous tone, the chilling way his boss's voice became almost gentle when he was plotting something particularly vicious. What's the play, boss? Vincent picked up the photo of Sophia holding her birthday cake box, her face radiant with unadulterated joy. A cruel smile stretched across his lips. Salvatore foolishly believes he's protecting them by keeping them close, he said, his voice dripping with venomous sarcasm. But proximity cuts both ways, Marco. The closer they are to him, the easier they are for us to reach. Back at the apartment, Salvatore was patiently instructing Sophia on the proper technique for lighting the candles on her birthday cake, his massive hands carefully guiding her small fingers as she struck each match. Elena watched from the kitchen doorway, her heart torn between profound gratitude and crippling terror. This man who had shown them such unexpected kindness was the same person whose enemies now wanted to use her daughter as a weapon. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Salvatore said softly as all 8 candles flickered to life, casting a warm glow on Sophia's upturned face. Sophia squeezed her eyes shut, her face contorted in an intense expression of concentration. When she opened them again, she looked directly at Salvatore, her gaze unwavering. "I wish that you wouldn't be sad anymore about your sister and your niece." The words struck Salvatore with the force of a physical blow, shattering the carefully constructed facade he had cultivated over the past 3 decades. He had carried that crushing grief for so long, had painstakingly built an empire on the foundation of that pain, using it as a driving force, a justification for his ruthlessness. Of that crushing pain. And then this innocent 7-year-old girl, with a heart as pure as spun gold, had offered to shoulder his burden with nothing more than a whispered birthday wish. Elenina saw the glistening tears welling in his hardened eyes, betraying the fortress he had built around himself. She felt something profound shift within her chest, a softening, an understanding. This wasn't the cold, calculating monster she had braced herself to face. This was a man fractured, his soul a mosaic of broken pieces, desperately trying to mend wounds that time had only deepened. "Thank you, Sophia," Salvatore rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "That's the most beautiful wish anyone has ever made for me." But their fragile moment of peace, a rare oasis in a desert of violence, was brutally shattered by the shrill ring of Salvatore's phone. He glanced at the caller ID, and the transformation was immediate and chilling. His shoulders coiled tight, his jaw clenched into a rigid line, the haunted look returning to his eyes with full force. "I have to take this." He moved with a sudden, predatory grace into the hallway, carefully closing the apartment door behind him, as if trying to contain the darkness that threatened to spill out. Elena pressed her ear against the cold, unyielding wood, straining to catch fragments of the urgent conversation. The muffled tones were laced with a barely suppressed fury. "What do you mean they're gone?" Salvatore's voice, though hushed, was sharp and dangerous, a honed blade. "How do 2 men just disappear from their posts? Vanish into thin air?" Elena's blood turned to glacial ice in her veins. The security guards, those stoic figures posted outside the building, the men entrusted with their very lives, had simply vanished. "Find them," Salvatore continued, his voice a low growl. "Turn this city upside down, and get a full team here now. I want every exit covered, every shadow watched." He paused, listening intently. "Because Vincent's making his move. I can feel it in my bones." Elena recoiled from the door, her mind reeling, the implications crashing down upon her like a tidal wave. She glanced back at Sophia, who was meticulously cutting her birthday cake into perfect, even triangles, her brow furrowed in concentration, utterly oblivious to the insidious danger that was now closing in around them, tightening like a hangman's noose. "Sophia," Elena said, forcing her voice to remain calm, to project an illusion of normalcy. "We need to play a game. Remember how we used to practice being very, very quiet when we lived at the shelter? Remember how good you were at hiding?" Sophia looked up, a smear of vibrant cake frosting adorning her chin, her eyes wide with innocent curiosity. "Are we playing hide and seek?" "Something like that." Elena knelt down, her voice a soothing whisper. "Baby, I need you to go to your room and get under the bed. Stay there, hidden and quiet, until Mommy comes to get you. Okay? No matter what you hear. No matter what." Sophia's face fell, her lower lip trembling slightly. "But what about my cake?" "We'll save it for later, sweetheart. Promise. It'll be our secret celebration cake. But right now, we need you to be brave." Salvatore burst back through the door, his movements radiating an almost palpable tension, just as Elena was gently ushering Sophia into her bedroom. His face was a grim mask, etched with a mixture of fury and fear, and he was speaking rapidly into his phone while simultaneously checking the locks on the windows, reinforcing the flimsy defenses with a desperate energy. "Tony, where's my backup? They should have been here 10 minutes ago. What's the hold-up?" He paused, listening to the response, his jaw tightening even further. "What do you mean the building is surrounded? By who? Get me names, Tony. I need to know who I'm dealing with." Elena felt her knees weaken, threatening to buckle beneath her. They were trapped, cornered like prey in a hunter's snare. There was no escape. Salvatore ended the call with a frustrated click and turned to face her, his expression a complex tapestry of apology and unwavering determination. "Elena, I need you to listen to me carefully. Vincent Torino has people positioned all around this building. Every entrance, every exit covered. My security team is either dead or compromised. We're on our own until reinforcements arrive. And I don't know who I can trust anymore." "How long?" Elena's voice was barely audible, a fragile whisper lost in the impending storm. 20 minutes, maybe 30. If we're lucky, maybe less." Elena's mind raced, a frantic whirlwind of fear and protective instinct. She pictured Sophia huddled under the bed in her new bedroom, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. She pictured the birthday cake sitting abandoned on the kitchen table, a symbol of the normalcy they so desperately craved. She thought about how quickly their fragile miracle, their hard-won sanctuary, had been transformed into a living nightmare. "There's something else," Salvatore said quietly, his voice heavy with dread. "Vincent doesn't just want to hurt you to get to me. That would be too simple. He wants to take Sophia." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating, like a poisonous gas. Elena felt something primal and fierce rise up inside her chest, a dormant strength that had been buried beneath months of quiet desperation, but was now roaring to life, a mother's fury unleashed. "Over my dead body," she said, her voice low and unwavering, each word a defiant challenge. Salvatore saw something in her eyes, a raw, untamed ferocity that reminded him why he had managed to survive 30 brutal years in a business where most men didn't last 5. He recognized the look of a cornered animal, ready to fight to the death to protect its young. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say," he replied, a grim smile playing on his lips as he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a small, sleek pistol. "Because we're going to have to fight for her, and it's going to be a long, ugly fight." Elena stared at the weapon, its cold, metallic surface reflecting the harsh reality of their situation. She had never held a gun in her life, had never imagined herself capable of such violence. The very idea was anathema to her. But as she thought about Vincent Torino's grasping hands reaching for her daughter, about Sophia's innocent trust and whispered birthday wishes, she discovered reserves of strength she didn't know existed, a wellspring of courage she never knew she possessed. "Show me how to use it," she said, her voice firm, all traces of fear replaced by a steely resolve. 3 floors below, Vincent's men were already moving silently through the building, their movements precise and coordinated, using stolen maintenance keys to access the service elevators and emergency stairwells. They moved like shadows, trained professionals who specialized in making problems disappear quietly and efficiently, leaving no trace behind. They were the best in the business, and they were here to take what Vincent wanted. Vincent himself waited patiently in his black sedan across the street, the engine idling softly, watching the apartment windows through high-powered binoculars. He had planned this operation meticulously, accounting for every possible variable, every potential obstacle. He had crafted a masterpiece of calculated precision. But there was one crucial element he had overlooked, one immeasurable force he had failed to factor into his equation. He had underestimated the boundless, unwavering power of a mother's love, the lengths to which she would go to protect her child. Inside the apartment, Salvatore was giving Elena a crash course in handling firearms, his instructions clipped and urgent, while simultaneously barricading the front door with every piece of furniture he could move. Keep both hands on the grip, firm but not too tight. Sight down the barrel, focus on your target. Squeeze, don't pull the trigger. It's all about control, Elena. Control of the weapon, control of your fear. He paused, his eyes locking with hers, his voice softening slightly. And Elena, if it ever comes down to choosing between your life and Sophia's safety, you choose Sophia every time. Without hesitation. Do you understand me? Elena nodded, surprised by how natural the weight of the gun felt in her hands. How quickly her fear was being replaced by a cold, focused determination. What about you? I've been preparing for this fight my whole life. I've lived it, breathed it, tasted it. Vincent thinks he's hunting a helpless woman and child. He's about to learn he's walked into a trap. And I'm the one who said it. The elevator dinged softly in the hallway outside their door, the sound echoing in the tense silence like a death knell. Salvatore held up his hand for silence, his senses on high alert, then moved cautiously to the window and peered through the blinds, his eyes scanning the hallway with a practiced gaze. 4 men in the hallway, heavily armed. 2 more visible on the fire escape outside. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. He turned back to Elena, his face grim. They're here. Elena crept towards Sophia's bedroom, her heart hammering so hard against her ribs she was sure everyone in the building could hear it. A frantic drumbeat of fear and desperation. She found her daughter exactly where she had left her, curled up under the bed with her threadbare stuffed animal clutched tightly in her arms, her eyes wide with fear but obedient, her small body trembling slightly. Stay here, sweetheart, no matter what happens, Elena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. If strangers come in, you don't make a sound. You stay hidden and you stay quiet. Can you do that for Mommy? Can you be my brave little girl? Sophia nodded solemnly, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and unwavering trust. Elena kissed her forehead, a silent promise of protection, and returned to the living room just as the first soft knock came at the door. It was polite, almost gentle, which somehow made it even more terrifying than if they had simply tried to break it down. Mr. Costa? A voice called through the door, smooth and menacing, like a serpent coiling before striking. We just want to talk. We know you're in there. It doesn't have to end this way. Salvatore looked at Elena. His eyes narrowed, and mouthed the words. Vincent's voice. The gunfire lasted exactly 17 minutes. 17 minutes of deafening chaos, of shattering glass and echoing screams, of a desperate battle fought within the confines of a small apartment. When the smoke finally cleared and the sirens finally faded into the distance, 3 lives had been forever altered by a single moment of unexpected kindness in a small bakery. Vincent Torino would never threaten another family. Salvatore Costa discovered that redemption was possible, even for men like him, men who had walked in darkness for far too long. And Elena learned that sometimes the most dangerous people in the world can also be the most fiercely protective, and that a mother's love is a force more powerful than any weapon. Sophia still has that birthday cake every year, though now it sits on a kitchen table in a house where laughter echoes through every room, and where a man who once ruled through fear learned to love through healing, one small act of kindness at a time. Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can create the biggest, most profound changes in the world, transforming lives and forging unbreakable bonds in the face of unimaginable adversity.